It all began quietly, almost imperceptibly, in a small monitoring station on the outskirts of Earth's most advanced space observation network. The world above was busy with its ordinary routines, the kind of routines that made life seem predictable and safe. Scientists scanned the skies day and night, but even they could not anticipate the storm that was about to ripple through the galaxy. On one ordinary evening, when the air was thick with the golden glow of sunset filtering through the laboratory windows, a subtle anomaly appeared on the screens. At first it was nothing more than a series of beeps, faint and irregular, the kind of thing that any researcher might dismiss as interference, cosmic noise, or equipment glitch. Yet something about the pattern did not fit the usual randomness of space signals. It had rhythm, a strange order to it, as if a message was trying desperately to make itself understood across the unimaginable distances of space. Dr. Elena Moretti, the head of the observation team, leaned closer to the monitor, her eyes narrowing as she traced the lines and sequences flashing across the screen. She was a woman of exceptional patience and meticulous skill, accustomed to spotting patterns in chaos, but even she felt a chill when the realization struck her. This was no ordinary signal. Someone or something was calling out. The faint bleeps carried an urgency that transcended mere science. They were an SOS. The room was silent for a few moments, each scientist processing what they had seen. The initial reaction was skepticism, as often happens when humans confront something beyond their understanding. "It's probably a malfunction," muttered one technician, rubbing his eyes. "Maybe a misaligned satellite or interference from a solar flare," another added. But Dr. Moretti had already started cross-referencing the data with other observatories, some orbiting satellites, and deep space listening stations scattered across the globe. Within hours, the anomaly had been confirmed. Multiple stations, hundreds of thousands of miles apart, were picking up the same signals, the same urgent sequences, the same unmistakable cry for help. As news of the discovery spread within the scientific community, the situation escalated rapidly. Messages flew across secure communication lines, reaching the highest levels of space governance. The Galactic Council, an interstellar body that included representatives from multiple advanced civilizations, was immediately notified. The council chambers, usually reserved for political debates and resource negotiations, were abuzz with tension and curiosity. Delegates from various planets, each with their own languages, technologies, and histories, gathered to witness the evidence. Screens around the chamber displayed the signals, their rhythmic patterns mesmerizing and unsettling at the same time. Some of the more skeptical delegates argued that it could still be natural phenomena, but the consensus leaned towards something far more profound. Meanwhile, on a distant and harsher world, the story was unfolding in a very different way. This was a planet humans might call a death world, a place where life had evolved in a brutal, unforgiving environment. Here, the native species, known collectively as the Deathworlders, were not accustomed to hesitation or indecision. Their instincts were sharp, honed over millennia of surviving storms, predators, and territorial wars that would make Earth's history seem tame. They detected the same signals that humans had identified, but their interpretation was immediate and instinctual. To them, an SOS was not just a request for help, it was a warning. They had learned long ago that signals like this often preceded danger, conflict, or catastrophe. There was no time to debate ethics or protocols. Preparation had to be immediate. The Deathworlders leaders convened their council of elders and commanders in a vast chamber carved from the bedrock of their planet. Here, holographic maps displayed not only their home system but the distant coordinates from which the signals originated. For the Deathworlders, space was a dangerous expanse, and movement across it required precision, planning, and strength. Their fleet, a combination of powerful warships and nimble scouts, had been in maintenance cycles, a routine schedule meant to keep their defense forces ready. Now that routine was abruptly disrupted. Orders were given swiftly, engines were fueled, and fleets were prepared for rapid deployment. The world's inhabitants worked in coordinated frenzy, aware that delay could cost lives, not only theirs but potentially those of the beings reaching out across the void. Back on Earth, the scientists continued to analyze the SOS patterns. They found something even more remarkable. The signals were not merely random pleas. They carried encoded information about the sender's location, environmental conditions, and the dangers threatening them. Some of the sequences hinted at an attack by an unknown enemy, while others described catastrophic damage to cities or structures that were not native to Earth. The implications were staggering. Life elsewhere in the galaxy was not only real, it was in crisis. Humanity had long theorized about extraterrestrial life, debated the likelihood of intelligent species beyond their solar system, and imagined scenarios of peaceful contact or conflict. But now, it was tangible, urgent, and terrifyingly real. Dr. Moretti and her team worked day and night, translating, decoding, and theorizing. They compared the SOS to known galactic communication protocols, searching for familiar markers. The signal's complexity was breathtaking, revealing a civilization that had survived long enough to develop sophisticated methods of transmitting information over light. Yet, amidst the sophistication, there was desperation. Every repeating pattern, every variation in frequency, carried an emotion that transcended words. It was fear, hope, and a plea for salvation all at once that humanity grappled with the magnitude of the discovery. The Galactic Council faced a different dilemma: how to respond. Some members argued for intervention, proposing that a fleet be sent to investigate immediately. Others cautioned against hasty action, fearing that rushing into the unknown could spark unintended conflict. After hours of debate, the Council decided on a two-pronged approach. Reconnaissance missions would be dispatched to observe the situation up close, while scientific teams would continue to study the signals for more clues. Meanwhile, Earth and other member planets were put on alert. Defense protocols were subtly adjusted, not for immediate combat, but to ensure readiness in case the situation deteriorated. While humans debated and calculated, the Deathworlders fleet had already begun its journey. Ships lifted from their homeworld with a silent grace, engines humming with controlled power. Their navigation systems charted a direct course toward the SOS signals, accounting for gravitational fields, asteroid belts, and other cosmic hazards. Unlike humans, the Deathworlders did not hesitate. Survival, honor, and duty propelled them forward. On board each vessel, the crews prepared for unknown challenges. Some were veteran warriors, their bodies trained for endurance and combat. Others were scientists and engineers, ready to adapt to whatever the SOS planet might demand. There was no fear in their actions, only a calculated awareness of risk and the commitment to meet the unknown with strength and precision. During the journey, the Deathworlders leaders communicated with each other through encrypted channels, sharing insights, strategies, and predictions. They speculated about the civilization in distress, piecing together details from the SOS patterns. Some hypothesized that the alien species might be technologically weaker, incapable of defending themselves against a looming threat. Others worried that the attackers might be powerful, perhaps even more advanced than their own fleet. The conversation was tense but professional, reflecting centuries of experience dealing with threats both on their homeworld and across hostile territories. As the fleet moved closer to the source, subtle changes in the signals became noticeable. The SOS pulses grew more rapid, more complex, as if the sender sensed hope but also desperation. It was as though the distant civilization knew that help was coming, yet feared that arrival might be too late. The Deathworlders recognized this instinctively. They increased speed, adjusted trajectories, and prepared their ships for immediate action upon reaching the SOS coordinates. Every officer, every crew member, understood that the first moments upon arrival could determine the survival of an entire species. Back on Earth, similar intensity filled the control rooms. Scientists and observers tracked the Deathworlders' movements with fascination and anxiety. Could this species, known for their ruthlessness and adaptability, act as saviors or destroyers? Would their intervention help the aliens in distress, or would it bring unforeseen consequences? Humanity watched, knowing that this moment, while distant in space, could be pivotal for life in the galaxy. As hours stretched into days, the suspense built steadily. The SOS signals, once intermittent, now formed coherent patterns indicating coordinates, environmental hazards, and even a timeline of events leading up to the disaster. Humans marveled at the intelligence behind the messages, while the Deathworlders interpreted them with precision and urgency. Both species, separated by unimaginable distances, were now linked in a web of communication and anticipation, each aware of the stakes. By the time the fleet reached the outer edge of the SOS signal's origin, the world had shifted. Scientists, council members, and Deathworlders alike understood that the quiet patterns first noticed on that ordinary evening were in fact the beginning of a galactic-scale drama. The signals were more than a call for help, they were a harbinger of conflict, courage, and survival. In that silent stretch of space, a distant civilization awaited their arrival, unaware of the Deathworlders' approach, yet holding a fragile hope that someone, somewhere, would answer their desperate plea. Every ship in the Deathworlders' fleet now moved with silent purpose. Their engines hummed, shields activated, and weapon systems were ready not necessarily for combat, but as a precaution. The crew studied the last updates of the signals, noting patterns that suggested both the potential for life and the signs of devastation. Somewhere in the darkness of space, a civilization's fate hung in balance, and the Deathworlders were on the move to meet it. In that moment, two worlds, Earth and the Deathworlders' homeworld, stood as witnesses to a single truth. The galaxy was far from silent, and life, no matter how distant, had a way of calling out when danger approached. It was the beginning of a journey that would test courage, strategy, and the limits of endurance. What started as a faint signal on a monitor was now a mission, a responsibility, and perhaps the first step toward a story that would be remembered across light years. As the first faint signals of distress had traveled across the stars, now their meaning became clearer, and with that clarity came urgency. The initial excitement of discovery was replaced by a mixture of concern and tension. Scientists on Earth were no longer just observing patterns, they were beginning to understand the story that the signals told. A story of a civilization under threat and struggling to survive. The information carried not only a warning but also detailed coordinates, environmental conditions, and hints of catastrophic events unfolding on a distant planet. Every piece of data added weight to the situation. This was not a theoretical encounter with life elsewhere in the galaxy. This was real, and it was desperate. In the control rooms, the atmosphere was electric. Scientists, engineers, and observers worked tirelessly, their eyes glued to screens displaying the intricate sequences of the SOS signals. Every pulse, every pause, every repeating pattern suggested intelligence, urgency, and fear. Dr. Elena Moretti, leading the analysis, began to notice changes in the signal's patterns, subtle fluctuations that hinted at escalating danger on the SOS planet. At first she thought they were distortions caused by distance or interference, but repeated observations confirmed that the signals were indeed conveying information about a deteriorating situation. Cities were being destroyed, entire landscapes were collapsing, and the alien civilization's capacity to survive was diminishing with every passing moment. Across the galaxy, the Deathworlders were already responding to the same signals with a precision that only a species, honed by harsh survival, could exhibit. Unlike humans, who still debated the best course of action, the Deathworlders moved with immediate purpose. Their fleet was no longer just mobilizing, it was executing a calculated strategy. Commanders aboard massive warships and smaller scout vessels coordinated through secure channels, plotting their approach with surgical accuracy. Every decision was measured, every action calculated. Unlike the humans, who were still processing the meaning of the signals, the Deathworlders had long understood the stakes. An SOS was never just a cry for help, it was an alert that life itself was at risk, and response could be a matter of survival. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council on Earth convened in extraordinary sessions. Delegates from multiple species, each with their own agendas, cultures, and levels of technological advancement, argued over the proper response. Some argued for immediate intervention, suggesting that reconnaissance ships or even armed fleets should be dispatched to assist. Others cautioned restraint, worried that any action could provoke conflict or misunderstanding. The debate was tense, but the evidence from the signals left little room for dismissal. The coordinates, the urgency, and the encoded distress messages made it clear that lives hung in the balance. Back on the Death World, the fleet had begun its journey across deep space. The ships moved silently yet purposefully, engines humming with controlled energy as they navigated the void. The crew aboard each vessel was aware of the stakes. Veterans who had survived countless hostile encounters prepared their weapons and defense systems, while scientists and engineers worked to ensure that every system functioned at peak efficiency. Even in the vast emptiness of space, the tension was palpable. The signals from the SOS planet continued to guide them, providing subtle updates on the conditions and movements on the planet below. As the fleet advanced, the Deathworlders faced natural obstacles, rogue asteroid fields, massive gravitational distortions, and unpredictable stellar phenomena forced them to adjust course continually. Every adjustment required careful calculation, as even a small error could spell disaster. On board the ships, the crew remained focused, performing tasks with the kind of precision and discipline only a civilization accustomed to constant threat could manage. There was no fear in their actions, only determination and readiness. They understood that speed was important, but survival required careful navigation. The signals from the SOS planet revealed more alarming information as the fleet approached. The alien civilization was under attack from an unknown enemy, one that appeared technologically advanced and highly aggressive. The reports encoded in the signals described cities reduced to rubble, energy shields failing, an entire population struggling to survive. The aliens' desperation was palpable in the patterns, a rhythm of fear and hope intertwined. The Deathworlders recognized the signs immediately. This was not a simple distress call. This was a call for a full-scale intervention. On Earth, the scientists and council members monitored the signals in real time. They watched as the Deathworlders' fleet began to make strategic movements, adjusting their approach according to the incoming data. There was both awe and apprehension. Humans were observing a species acting with decisiveness and precision on a scale that they themselves had not yet mastered. Many scientists began to speculate about the capabilities of the recognizing that these were not ordinary space travelers. They were a civilization built to respond to extreme threats, to survive the most hostile environments, and to act with both intelligence and instinct. Communication attempts with the alien civilization on the SOS planet continued, though sporadically. The signals were often fragmented, disrupted by whatever catastrophic events were occurring on the planet. Yet, even in fragments, the story was horrifying. Entire districts had been destroyed, key leaders were missing or captured, and natural disasters possibly triggered by external attack were wreaking havoc. Every day that passed without intervention meant greater loss of life. The Deathworlders, reading these signals, felt the urgency deeply. Their fleet accelerated, moving closer to the SOS planet, aware that even minor delays could be catastrophic. As the Deathworlders drew nearer, they began to deploy smaller, more agile ships designed for reconnaissance and rapid response. These scouts moved ahead of the main fleet, transmitting real-time data back to the command vessels. The information painted a clearer picture of the enemy forces, environmental hazards, and the survivors' condition. It became evident that the alien civilization was technologically weaker and physically vulnerable, struggling to defend itself against an aggressor that seemed unstoppable. Yet the Deathworlders were undeterred. Their strategy shifted from simple navigation to preparation for a coordinated rescue and defense operation. The Galactic Council observed these movements with a mixture of relief and concern. They recognized the Deathworlders' capability and efficiency but were also wary of the implications. If this fleet intervened, it could prevent mass extinction, but it could also escalate tensions across the galaxy. Diplomacy was difficult when stakes were so high, and every action carried potential consequences. Council members debated whether humans should attempt to contact the SOS planet as well or allow the Deathworlders to take the lead. Some argued for collaboration, while others warned that misunderstanding could lead to conflict with either the Deathworlders or the attackers. Meanwhile, aboard the Deathworlders' vessels, the crew prepared for multiple contingencies. Combat teams trained for immediate engagement, medical units readied emergency treatment protocols, and engineers ensured that energy shields, propulsion systems, and communication arrays were fully operational. Even the youngest cadets were involved in preparation, understanding that every role, no matter how small, could determine the outcome of the mission. The fleet was a finely tuned machine, each part working in harmony. Moving closer to a planet in crisis, the SOS signals continued to evolve. The alien civilization attempted to encode more detailed instructions for survival, hoping that whoever received the message would understand their plight. Some messages described safe zones, supply caches, and critical areas where survivors were concentrated. Others detailed the movements of the enemy, providing insight into their strategies and weaknesses. It was a mix of hope and fear, as if the aliens were telling the Deathworlders, "Please come quickly, but be careful, we are not safe, and neither are you." As the fleet approached the outer perimeter of the SOS planet system, tension reached a new level. Sensors detected the first signs of debris fields from destroyed satellites and fragments of planetary structures, evidence of the enemy's destructive power. The Deathworlders adjusted their formation, readying both offensive and defensive measures. Scouts relayed images of the planet's surface, showing smoke rising from cities, vast craters where buildings once stood, and scattered groups of survivors seeking shelter. The signals, once abstract patterns, now had contexts. They were the lifelines of a civilization on the brink of collapse. The human scientists monitored these developments with bated breath. They were witnessing a coordinated response that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The Deathworlders acted with decisiveness, courage, and skill that humans could only aspire to. Yet, despite their efficiency, the situation was still dire. The SOS planet's inhabitants were vulnerable, and the unknown enemy remained a looming threat. It became clear that the coming encounter would not be simple. It would be a high-stakes mission of survival, strategy, and courage. Hours before entering the planet's immediate vicinity, the Deathworlders conducted final preparations. Ships activated advanced scanning equipment to map out enemy positions and potential hazards on the surface. Tactical plans were finalized, outlining multiple approaches for rescue, engagement, and evacuation. Every crew member reviewed their responsibilities, understanding that success would require not only strength but intelligence, coordination, and adaptability. Even the psychological strain was acknowledged. The stress of impending danger could affect decisions, so leaders ensured that morale remained high, emphasizing duty, focus, and the importance of saving lives. The SOS planet, oblivious to the approaching fleet, continued to send signals in the hope that someone, somewhere, would respond. The signals pulsed with a rhythm that spoke of fear and hope intertwined. A desperate plea carried across the vast emptiness of space. Somewhere, billions of miles away, a fleet moved with silent purpose to meet that plea, unaware of whether they would encounter gratitude, hostility, or even tragedy upon arrival. The tension was palpable, the stakes immense, and the outcome uncertain. At this stage, two distinct narratives were unfolding simultaneously. Humans on Earth observed, analyzed, and debated. The Galactic Council weighed risks, prepared contingency plans, and monitored every development. Meanwhile, the Deathworlders, a species honed for survival and decisive action, approached the SOS planet with purpose and precision. Both watched the signals, understood the stakes, and prepared for consequences that neither fully knew. The galaxy, vast and unknowable, was beginning to converge around a single pointer planet crying out for help, and a fleet answering that call with unflinching determination. As the fleet moved closer, the final signals from the SOS planet grew more urgent, indicating that time was running out. Small pockets of survivors had been identified, areas of temporary safety that were soon under threat. The Deathworlders began planning immediate interventions, calculating trajectories for safe landing zones, prioritizing areas with the highest concentration of survivors, and preparing for potential encounters with hostile forces. Every decision mattered, and there was no margin for error. In those critical hours, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The faint signals that had first appeared as a curiosity on a monitor now carried the weight of life and death, hope and despair, survival and extinction. The Deathworlders fleet advanced with unwavering resolve, ready to face unknown dangers, rescue a civilization in peril, and alter the course of events across multiple star systems. Meanwhile, humans watched, fascinated and anxious, understanding that this moment was unprecedented, a glimpse into the raw, unfolding drama of life beyond their own world. The SOS signals continued to pulse across the vast expanse of space, more urgent than ever, carrying with them the story of a civilization on the brink. The alien species that had sent these messages were struggling to survive against forces beyond their understanding. Every signal was a testament to their desperation, fragmented, erratic, yet full of intelligence, trying to communicate coordinates, safe zones, warnings, and fragments of their story. Humans monitored these signals from their observatories with a mix of awe and anxiety. Scientists like Dr. Elena Moretti tried to decode the messages fully, but the reality of what they represented, an entire civilization under immediate threat, was becoming harder to ignore. Yet, while humans debated and analyzed, the Deathworlders had already begun to face the challenges of their journey. Their fleet, moving through the void of space, encountered the first signs of true danger. It was one thing to prepare for a mission theoretically. It was another to navigate space filled with unpredictable hazards, each capable of ending a ship's journey in an instant. Rogue asteroids, previously invisible to sensors, loomed in unexpected clusters, forcing fleet commanders to make split-second decisions. The Deathworlders' ships swerved and adjusted with precision, engines thrumming with the controlled power of expertly designed technology. Even so, the natural dangers of space tested their limits. Small miscalculations could have led to catastrophic collisions, and every maneuver required absolute focus. As they navigated these hazards, the fleet also had to contend with mechanical difficulties. Ships, no matter how advanced, were machines subject to failure. Propulsion units occasionally faltered, shield generators fluctuated, and communication arrays sometimes lagged, creating gaps in coordination. Engineers worked tirelessly to maintain functionality, running diagnostics and performing repairs while the fleet pressed onward. Crew members slept in shifts, never fully at rest, knowing that any lapse could result in disaster. The combination of environmental obstacles and mechanical challenges added tension to an already urgent mission, testing both the fleet's technology and the resilience of its inhabitants. The SOS planet itself was a place of chaos. Sensors indicated that cities had been partially destroyed, and the signals revealed that the alien civilization was facing threats from an unknown, aggressive forces with superior technology, capable of striking with precision and devastating effect. Entire districts had collapsed, and vital infrastructure had been reduced to rubble. Survivors clung to life in scattered pockets, attempting to avoid both natural hazards and the movements of the enemy. The planet's surface was scarred by impacts and explosions, leaving a landscape of devastation that challenged even the most prepared rescuers. Every update the Deathworlders received emphasized urgency. The window to intervene was shrinking rapidly. Despite the overwhelming challenges, the Deathworlders remained undeterred. Their species had evolved in conditions far harsher than the SOS planet, and they had learned to operate under extreme pressure. Commanders coordinated with precision, issuing orders that accounted for environmental hazards, potential enemy encounters, and the immediate needs of the survivors. Scout ships were deployed ahead of the main fleet, tasked with gathering real-time data on terrain, enemy positions, and safe landing zones. These smaller vessels, nimble and fast, were the eyes and ears of the larger fleet, capable of adapting to unexpected threats almost instantaneously. As the fleet advanced, the signals continued to provide vital intelligence. The alien civilization had managed to encode locations of survivors, emergency supplies, and potential safe zones. However, interpreting these signals required skill and focus. Even small errors in translation could have deadly consequences. The Deathworlders, scientists, and communication experts worked alongside tactical officers to ensure that no piece of information was misunderstood. This coordination, though challenging, allowed the fleet to plan interventions with remarkable accuracy. Every piece of data was weighed carefully, every decision evaluated for risk, and every potential outcome considered. The situation on the SOS planet continued to worsen. The aggressor, unidentified and technologically advanced, was relentless. Sensors showed movement of enemy forces across key areas, destroying remaining infrastructure and pursuing survivors. The planet's environment, already fragile due to the conflict, suffered additional stress. Earthquakes, fires, and chemical contamination compounded the danger for the remaining inhabitants. Each signal transmitted from the SOS planet reflected growing fear, a mixture of hope and despair. Survivors struggled to stay alive, moving from one temporary shelter to another, often at great personal risk. Their desperation was palpable even through the data streams traveling across light years. The Death fleet faced not only environmental and mechanical challenges but also the psychological strain of the mission. Crew members were acutely aware of their lives depending on their success. Veteran officers trained in combat strategy had to balance aggression with caution, ensuring that any engagement with enemy forces minimized risk to the alien survivors. Medical teams prepared for large-scale emergencies, understanding that injuries could occur not only from combat but from environmental hazards as well. Even the engineers, constantly repairing and maintaining the ships, carried the weight of responsibility. Every functional system could mean life or death for those they were rushing to save. As they drew closer to the SOS planet, the Deathworlders faced additional surprises. Sensor readings indicated rogue forces not previously accounted for, including remnants of older conflicts and natural anomalies in the planet's atmosphere. Unstable weather patterns threatened the fleet's descent, and magnetic storms interfered with communications. Every complication required immediate problem-solving and adaptability. Commanders made split-second decisions, adjusting flight paths, reallocating resources, and ensuring that no vessel lagged behind. The fleet's unity and coordination were tested continuously, and the crews relied heavily on training, discipline, and trust in their leaders. Despite these obstacles, the Deathworlders remained focused on the primary mission: rescue and protection. Their scouts transmitted detailed images of survivor clusters, enemy positions, and safe zones. Commanders studied these images intensely, devising strategies for extraction that prioritized lives while minimizing risk. They identified choke points, potential ambush sites, and escape routes, mapping every detail of the environment before committing to action. Even in the face of uncertainty, the fleet moved with deliberate purpose, a well-coordinated machine responding to a civilization's cry for help. The alien civilization's signals occasionally included pleas for guidance, attempts to describe conditions on the ground, and requests for immediate assistance. These communications, though fragmented, were invaluable. The Deathworlders interpreted every nuance, every hesitation, every repeated sequence, understanding that these were the voices of a species at the edge of survival. Some of the messages conveyed instructions for surviving temporary hazards, while others conveyed despair and fear, giving the rescuers insight into both the physical and psychological state of the survivors. Meanwhile, humans observed all of this with increasing fascination. Through telescopes, data feeds, and secure transmissions, they watched a species act decisively across light years. They marveled at the coordination, precision, and courage of the Death. For the first time, humanity was witnessing an interstellar mission of rescue on a scale far beyond their own experience. The implications were enormous. Life in the galaxy was interconnected, and actions in one part of the cosmos could have far-reaching consequences elsewhere. Humans understood that this mission, unfolding in real time, could shape not only the fate of the SOS planet but the dynamics of power and influence across entire star systems. On the SOS planet, survivors continued to struggle against the dual threats of the enemy and their environment. They had begun to adapt to the chaos, moving in small coordinated groups, utilizing makeshift shelters, and scavenging for resources. Some attempted to defend themselves using whatever technology remained, though these efforts were often insufficient against the aggressors' superior forces. The signals they sent reflected their efforts, describing both success and failure, providing the Deathworlders with critical information for planning. Interventions. As the Deathworlders approached the planet's orbit, the signals became increasingly detailed. The alien civilization, despite their peril, tried to provide real-time guidance for safe landing zones, indicating areas where survivors were concentrated and hazards were minimal. The fleet studied these transmissions meticulously, planning not only for rescue but also for potential defensive actions. Each crew member understood that success required both precision and adaptability. The signals, once a distant cry across the galaxy, were now guiding every movement of the fleet, in addition to planning for rescue. The Deathworlders prepared for potential engagement with the aggressor. Combat units studied enemy patterns, analyzing weaknesses, strengths, and likely strategies. Tactical simulations were run aboard command vessels, testing various scenarios and refining responses. Every possibility was considered, from direct confrontation to stealthy extraction, ensuring that no plan relied solely on luck. The combination of strategic preparation, disciplined execution, and reliance on data made the fleet formidable even before reaching the planet's surface. As orbital insertion approached, tension aboard the fleet reached its peak. Every crew member was alert, aware that the next steps would determine the survival of thousands of lives. Medical teams, combat units, engineers, and navigators were all in place, ready to act simultaneously. The Deathworlders understood that coordination and timing were critical. Even a minor miscalculation could jeopardize the mission. Scouts continued to relay images and environmental data, ensuring that every decision was based on accurate, up-to-date information. On the SOS planet, survivors had little awareness of the approaching fleet. Their focus was entirely on immediate survival, avoiding enemy patrols, finding shelter, and staying alive. Yet unknowingly, their signals had already set the stage for rescue. Each repeated SOS pulse, each encoded sequence, guided the Deathworlders closer to them. The interplay of desperation and hope was palpable, as every moment brought both danger and potential salvation. Finally, As the fleet reached the edge of the SOS planet's atmosphere, all the preparation, coordination, and analysis came together. The Deathworlders were ready to respond to the signals with decisive action, fully aware that the situation on the planet was critical. Every obstacle they had faced, natural hazards, mechanical failures, unknown enemy forces had strengthened their readiness. They were poised at the threshold of engagement, their actions about to determine the fate of an entire civilization. The galaxy seemed to contract around the SOS planet, focusing the attention of observers and participants alike. The signals that had traveled light years now guided the Deathworlders in real time, shaping every maneuver, every decision, every action. The stakes were higher than ever, the risks immense, and the outcome uncertain. Yet, the fleet advanced with determination, precision, and an unshakable commitment to their mission, saving lives, confronting danger, and ensuring that the SOS signals they had received were not in vain. The Deathworlders fleet had finally reached the outer edges of the SOS planet's orbit, and with that arrival, the first real sense of anticipation gripped every crew member. The signals, once distant pulses across light years, now had context. They painted a vivid picture of a civilization in turmoil, with survivors scattered, cities damaged, and an enemy striking with deadly precision. What had begun as a distant mission of curiosity and duty had transformed into an urgent, high-stakes operation where the margin for error was virtually non-existent. Every officer, every engineer, every scout understood that the next hours could determine the fate of thousands of lives. Scouts were deployed first, slipping silently into the planet's upper atmosphere to gather critical information. These smaller, nimble ships flew closer than the massive warships, transmitting real-time images of terrain, hazards, and enemy movements. Smoke rose from cities, twisted metal and debris littered streets, and small groups of survivors moved cautiously, attempting to avoid detection by the relentless enemy. The scene was chaotic, but patterns began to emerge. The Deathworlders' intelligence officers and strategists pored over these images, mapping out clusters of survivors, assessing the aggressors' tactics, and predicting possible movements. Every detail mattered. The difference between success and catastrophe could come down to a single overlooked factor. Meanwhile, aboard the larger command vessels, tactical officers gathered to discuss the first stage of engagement. The fleet's plan had been prepared meticulously in advance, accounting for countless scenarios, but real-time data now required adjustments. Landing zones had to be chosen carefully to avoid both environmental hazards and enemy patrols. Rescue teams needed precise coordinates to extract survivors quickly and safely. Defensive units had to position themselves strategically, ready to engage if the enemy approached. Every decision carried immense weight, and the room was thick with tension as the leaders balanced speed, safety, and efficiency. The signals from the SOS planet continued to provide guidance. Survivors had begun transmitting their own data, instructions for where they were hiding, where supplies could be found, and what areas were particularly dangerous. Their attempts to communicate, though often fragmented and interrupted, were invaluable. Every pulse of their SOS signals carried both hope and fear. For the Deathworlders, interpreting these signals was a priority equal to physical preparation. Understanding the psychological state and intentions of the survivors allowed them to anticipate behavior, plan effective extraction routes, and minimize panic during rescue operations. As the fleet prepared to descend, the reality of the mission became tangible. The planet's surface was scarred by ongoing conflict and environmental damage. Craters, collapsed buildings, and burned landscapes told a story of violence and destruction. Survivors had no time to dwell on fear. They had to move quickly, navigate unstable terrain, and avoid the enemy. Every movement carried risk, but the signals indicated a growing awareness that help was arriving. Their hope, however fragile, was now linked to the arrival of the Deathworlders fleet. On board the fleet, crew members prepared themselves mentally and physically. Soldiers checked weapons, shields were activated, medical units reviewed emergency procedures, and engineers performed final system checks. Even those not directly involved in combat understood the importance of their roles. Every system, every function, every crew member contributed to the mission's success. The preparation was meticulous because the stakes were higher than anything the fleet had faced before. A single mistake could result in failure, not just for the Death, but for the fragile civilization they were striving to protect. As descent began, the scouts moved closer to the planet's surface, providing detailed scans of urban and rural areas where survivors were concentrated. These scans revealed both natural and artificial hazards. Fires still burned, weakening the structures of buildings and bridges. Toxic clouds from industrial destruction drifted across regions, threatening both survivors and rescuers. The enemy forces were scattered but strategically positioned, their patrols and monitoring systems presenting a constant risk of detection. Navigating this environment required precision, coordination, and adaptability. The Deathworlders fleet now split into specialized units. Some ships focused on reconnaissance and mapping, transmitting constant updates to the command center. Other units were prepared for immediate engagement, ready to neutralize threats if the enemy approached critical survivor zones. Rescue teams were assigned to specific clusters of civilians, each team armed, shielded, and trained to respond quickly to unexpected challenges. Medical personnel were stationed at strategic points, prepared to treat injuries and stabilize survivors before evacuation. The coordination resembled a well-oiled machine, with every component understanding its function and importance. As the first rescue teams landed, the situation became immediate and personal. Survivors, initially cautious and terrified, began to see the fleet's true intentions. The presence of the Deathworlders brought a mixture of relief and hope, but also uncertainty. Could these new arrivals be trusted? Would they act with compassion or aggression? Observing body language, tone of signals, and patterns of behavior, the rescuers made quick assessments, communicating reassurance and instructions. Their professionalism and decisiveness gradually began to calm the survivors. Though tension remained high, the enemy, however, had not remained idle. As the Deathworlders deployed rescue units, patrols detected unusual energy signatures, prompting immediate alerts. This forced the fleet to adjust its approach dynamically. Some units were redirected to intercept potential threats, while others continued their rescue operations, maintaining focus on the primary mission, safeguarding the alien population. Strategic maneuvers required constant communication, split-second decisions, and a combination of offensive and defensive tactics. Every engagement had to be carefully managed to minimize risk and maximize the chance of success. Meanwhile, environmental challenges persisted. Some landing zones were unstable due to ongoing destruction, requiring rescue teams to adapt and improvise. Fires, crumbling structures, and toxic fumes complicated movement. Scouts provided continuous data, but teams still had to make real-time decisions to avoid hazards. The combination of enemy presence and environmental instability created a complex, dynamic battlefield. The Deathworlders' adaptability and experience proved invaluable. Their training in unpredictable environments allowed them to respond effectively, maintaining momentum despite constant challenges. The survivors themselves played a crucial role in this phase of the operation. Guided by the signals they had sent and updated instructions from the rescue teams, they began moving toward designated extraction points. Their knowledge of the terrain, hazards, and enemy movements proved invaluable. Even in fear, they demonstrated remarkable courage, navigating through dangerous areas to reach safety. Communication between survivors and rescuers became increasingly efficient, creating a coordinated effort that improved both speed and safety of extraction. As rescue operations intensified, the scale of the enemy threat became clearer. Sensors detected organized units, advanced weapons, and strategic positions that suggested the aggressor had significant planning capability. Confrontations, though initially limited, tested the fleet's readiness. Combat units engaged with precision, neutralizing threats while minimizing risk to both survivors and their own forces. Tactical decisions were constantly reassessed based on real-time feedback, demonstrating a level of coordination and strategic awareness that had taken years of training to achieve. Throughout this phase, leadership aboard the fleet emphasized communication, morale, and focus. Officers maintained constant contact with rescue teams, coordinating actions and responding to unexpected developments. Psychological support was provided to both crew and survivors, ensuring that fear did not undermine the mission. The importance of trust, discipline, and morale was evident. Even the most advanced technology would be ineffective without the cooperation and resilience of the people operating it. As the Deathworlders continued their operations, the SOS planet began to show signs of stabilization in areas where rescue and defense were most effective. Fires were contained, enemy movements disrupted, and survivors consolidated in safer zones. The signals reflected this progress, showing both relief and cautious optimism. Yet the situation remained volatile. Threats could re-emerge, environmental hazards persisted, and every action had to be continuously evaluated. The fleet's ability to respond dynamically, using both intelligence and adaptability, was critical to maintaining progress. By the time the first major phase of rescue concluded, the Deathworlders had established temporary strongholds in critical zones. Survivors were gathered, basic medical care provided, and emergency supplies distributed. Communication networks were re-established, allowing for more coordinated operations moving forward. Though far from complete, the initial success demonstrated the fleet's capability and the potential for achieving larger objectives, stabilizing the planet, protecting survivors, and ultimately confronting the aggressor in a decisive manner. Both human observers and the Deathworlders understood that the turning point of the mission had been reached. The fleet had moved from preparation and navigation into active engagement and rescue. Success now depended on maintaining momentum, adaptability, and coordination under pressure. The SOS signals, once distant cries for help, were now integral to every decision, guiding actions and shaping outcomes. The alien civilization, still vulnerable, had gained a tangible sense of hope, their trust gradually growing in the fleet that had answered their call. Every day, every hour, every minute counted. The Deathworlders' fleet continued to balance the dual objectives of rescue and defense, navigating hazards, countering enemy movements, and ensuring that survivors were not further endangered. The complexity of operations, the intensity of engagement, and the stakes involved made this phase one of the most challenging in the fleet's history. Yet their discipline, preparation, and commitment allowed them to operate effectively, demonstrating courage, intelligence, and adaptability in the face of extreme adversity. The fleet had effectively turned the tide in the immediate zones of engagement. Survivors were safer, enemy operations disrupted, and the planet's immediate stability improved. The SOS signals, while still reflecting ongoing threats, now also carried gratitude, coordination, and hope. For the first time, the alien civilization could see that salvation was within reach. And for the mission had entered a new stage one, where decisive action would determine not only survival but the long-term outcome of the conflict that had brought them here. The SOS planet, once a place of desperate signals and scattered survivors, had become a battlefield unlike any the Deathworlders had faced before. The enemy, who had been striking with ruthless efficiency, now confronted the fleet directly. What had been an operation focused on rescue and defense had escalated into full-scale engagement. Every pulse of the SOS signals, once a plea for help, now carried updates of ongoing combat, alerts about enemy positions, and frantic cries from the survivors who were caught in the middle of a conflict far larger than themselves. The situation was chaotic, but it was in this chaos that the Death excelled. The moment of the first real confrontation arrived as enemy forces attempted to intercept one of the larger extraction units carrying survivors from a crumbling city. The Deathworlders' tactical teams, trained for unpredictability and rapid response, engaged immediately. Energy shields flared as weapon systems activated, and precise maneuvers allowed the rescue ship to avoid direct hits while returning fire. From orbit, command vessels monitored every move, guiding teams with split-second precision. The battle was intense but controlled. The Deathworlders had learned to balance aggression with the need to protect civilians. Every decision mattered, and hesitation could cost lives. Survivors watched in awe and terror as the battle unfolded. Many had never witnessed such coordinated power, and fear mixed with hope in equal measure. Some clung to destroyed walls for cover, while others cautiously followed the guidance of Deathworlder operatives moving through the chaos. The alien signals, which had once been coded messages of hope, now became a communication lifeline for those on the ground. Simple instructions about where to hide, when to move, and how to avoid enemy fire were transmitted continuously, guiding groups of survivors through deadly terrain. In the midst of the engagement, the enemy revealed its true strength. Advanced weapon systems, faster ships, and strategic formations demonstrated that this was not a simple raiding force but a coordinated and technologically capable adversary. Enemy ships targeted key rescue units, attempting to disrupt operations and inflict maximum casualties. Sensors detected the movements of reinforcements and adaptive tactics designed to counter the Deathworlder strategies. Despite this, the fleet remained composed, relying on superior training, coordination, and adaptability. Combat teams on the ground, alongside aerial and orbital support units, executed complex maneuvers to protect survivors and neutralize threats. The battle was dynamic and fluid, requiring constant adaptation. Explosions lit the skies, weapons fire streaked across cities, and defensive shields shimmered against relentless attacks. Every operator, from navigators to gunners, understood the stakes. Lives hung in the balance, and success depended on a combination of precision, speed, and resilience. Even minor errors could have catastrophic consequences, but the Deathworlders' discipline allowed them to maintain cohesion under pressure. Meanwhile, medical teams worked tirelessly to stabilize injured survivors. Burns, lacerations, and trauma from collapsing buildings were common. Teams moved under fire, often risking their own safety to save lives. Makeshift triage centers were established in relatively safe zones, and personnel worked around the clock to ensure that every survivor received immediate care. Psychological support was also crucial. Panic among survivors could lead to chaos and further risk. Deathworlders communicated calm and authority, instilling trust and helping people focus on survival. The enemy, sensing that their previous advantage had diminished, adapted their tactics. Coordinated strikes, targeted isolated units, and ambushes tested the fleet's readiness. They attempted to cut off escape routes and create confusion among both survivors and rescuers. The Deathworlders countered with real-time analysis and rapid redeployment of forces. Scouts relayed enemy positions, allowing rescue teams to adjust paths, while combat units moved to intercept threats before they could reach civilians. The engagement became a complex chess game played across land, air, and orbit. Despite the ferocity of the battle, moments of courage and heroism emerged. Young Deathworlder cadets lead survivors through narrow alleys, engineers defused traps and stabilized collapsing structures, and veteran officers coordinated defensive maneuvers that allowed extraction teams to complete their missions. Survivors, inspired by the skill and bravery of their rescuers, began assisting in small ways, guiding teams through hidden passages, warning of enemy patrols, and carrying supplies. The synergy between rescuers and survivors created a remarkable dynamic that enhanced both safety and efficiency. From orbit, the command ships monitored the entire battlefield, making strategic decisions in real time. They analyzed patterns in enemy movement, calculated trajectories for support strikes, and coordinated with multiple units simultaneously. Communication networks were pushed to their limits, transmitting instructions to hundreds of units across the planet. Every decision was data-driven, informed by constant feedback from scouts, sensors, and survivor signals. The scale of coordination was staggering. Yet the fleet maintained precision and discipline throughout. As the battle progressed, the Deathworlders began to gain the upper hand. Their ability to anticipate enemy tactics, combined with their superior adaptability, allowed them to turn the tide in critical areas. Rescue operations became more efficient, with survivors moved to safer zones and medical care delivered without interruption. Key enemy positions were neutralized, and coordinated strikes disrupted reinforcements. The once overwhelming threat of the enemy began to wane under the relentless efficiency of the fleet. Still, the situation remained tense. The SOS planet's surface was heavily damaged. Every victory was tempered by the awareness that danger could resurge at any moment. Debris, environmental hazards, and secondary explosions created constant challenges. Tactical decisions required balancing aggressive action against threats with caution to prevent unnecessary risk to survivors. The Deathworlders relied on real-time communication, strategic foresight, and the discipline of their personnel to navigate this complexity successfully. As the climax of the battle approached, the fleet focused on neutralizing the enemy's command structure. Intelligence gathered from scouts indicated the location of the enemy flagship, a heavily armed vessel coordinating attacks across multiple fronts. The plan was bold: strike decisively to disrupt enemy operations, while ensuring that rescue and medical units remained protected. Commanders coordinated a multi-pronged assault, combining orbital bombardment, direct engagement, and diversionary tactics. Every ship, every team, and every unit played a critical role in executing the plan. The assault began with precision strikes targeting enemy weapons and communication systems. Explosions rocked the enemy flagship, disrupting coordination and creating openings for the Deathworlders' forces. Ground units simultaneously moved to secure strategic positions, while rescue teams continued operations uninterrupted. The enemy, caught off guard by the synchronized assault, struggled to adapt. Despite their advanced technology, they could not overcome the fleet's superior coordination and real-time intelligence. In the final moments of the confrontation, the Deathworlders focused on capturing or neutralizing key enemy leaders. Their tactics combined direct force with strategic precision, ensuring minimal risk to survivors. The enemy's remaining units were either destroyed or forced to retreat, leaving the SOS planet under the protection of the fleet. Survivors, witnessing the turning point, felt a surge of hope and relief. The signals, once filled with desperation, now reflected gratitude, coordination, and cautious optimism. Throughout the battle, every member of the fleet demonstrated courage, skill, and discipline. From the youngest cadet to the most experienced commander, each contributed to the success of the mission. Engineers maintained critical systems, medical teams treated the injured under fire, scouts provided continuous intelligence, and combat units executed complex maneuvers with precision. The operation was a testament to the training, preparation, and adaptability of the Deathworlders as a civilization, capable of extraordinary feats. As the smoke cleared and the immediate threat was neutralized, the scale of destruction became apparent. Cities were damaged, infrastructure was disrupted, and the environment bore scars of the conflict. Yet, despite this devastation, the mission was a success. Thousands of survivors had been rescued, the enemy's forces neutralized, and the SOS signals had been answered with decisive action. The planet, while still in recovery, was now under the protection of a fleet that had demonstrated both power and compassion. The aftermath of the battle required careful planning and continued vigilance. Rescue operations were extended to ensure that all survivors were located and evacuated. Medical care, food, and shelter were provided systematically, with teams working tirelessly to stabilize the situation. The Deathworlders maintained a protective presence, preventing any resurgence of enemy activity while facilitating the reorganization of the SOS civilization. Coordination with survivors became smoother as trust and cooperation increased. During this phase, the significance of the mission became clear. The Deathworlders had not only responded to the SOS signals but had transformed a desperate situation into a controlled and coordinated operation of rescue and defense. Their actions demonstrated the importance of preparation, adaptability, and decisive leadership in the face of overwhelming challenges. The SOS civilization, once on the brink of annihilation, now had a chance to survive and rebuild, guided by the fleet that had answered their call. The battle also had wider implications. Observers from other civilizations, including humans, recognized the scale, precision, and courage of the Deathworlders' operation. It became clear that the fleet was a formidable force, capable of influencing events on a planetary and even interstellar level. The SOS signals, which had initiated the mission, had not only saved lives but also revealed the Deathworlders' strength and strategic brilliance to the wider galaxy. The immediate danger had passed. The enemy had been neutralized or forced to retreat. Survivors had been consolidated in secure zones, and the fleet had established control over key strategic areas. The SOS signals now carried messages of coordination and guidance rather than desperation. The planet, while still recovering, was stable enough for systematic reconstruction and long-term planning. The mission had reached a turning point. The fleet's intervention had ensured survival, restored a measure of safety, and set the stage for rebuilding and recovery. As the Deathworlders assessed the aftermath, they reflected on the lessons learned. Coordination, adaptability, and real-time intelligence had been crucial to success. Every decision had required balancing risk with the need to protect civilians. Training, preparation, and discipline had allowed the fleet to operate effectively under extreme stress. The mission had tested the limits of endurance, strategy, and courage, but had also demonstrated the capability of a civilization committed to responding decisively to a call for help in the final hours. The SOS civilization began to organize themselves with guidance from the fleet. Leaders emerged from among the survivors, inspired by the courage and skill of their rescuers. Communication networks were restored, basic infrastructure stabilized, and a coordinated plan for rebuilding began to take shape. The signals, once frantic cries for help, now reflected a civilization that had endured a nightmare and survived. Thanks to the decisive and extraordinary efforts of the Deathworlders fleet, the Deathworlders departed not as conquerors but as guardians who had acted decisively, efficiently, and compassionately in response to a desperate SOS signal. Their departure left a legacy of resilience, cooperation, and strategic brilliance, echoing across the planet and the wider galaxy. Human observers, monitoring the entire operation, gained insights into the dynamics of interstellar rescue, coordination under pressure, and the impact of decisive action on a civilization in crisis. The mission demonstrated the potential for interspecies cooperation, the power of intelligence-driven strategy, and the importance of timely intervention. It also highlighted the fragility and resilience of civilizations, the importance of signals as both warnings and lifelines, and the transformative effect of courage and discipline in extreme circumstances. As the SOS civilization continued to rebuild, new opportunities emerged. Knowledge gained from the Deathworlders' intervention allowed them to improve defense systems, communication networks, and societal structures. Children educated in temporary programs now envisioned futures shaped by cooperation, resilience, and technological understanding. Adults applied lessons learned during the crisis to governance, resource management, and social cohesion. The signals, now used for communication, education, and planning, reflected a civilization transformed by survival, experience, and interstellar connection. By the end of this phase, the SOS planet was no longer merely a site of disaster but a symbol of hope, cooperation, and renewal. The Deathworlders fleet had achieved its mission with precision and care, leaving survivors equipped to manage their future and secure against lingering threats. The galaxy had witnessed the power of decisive action guided by intelligence, discipline, and compassion. The SOS signals, once a desperate call across the stars, had been answered fully, transforming despair into resilience, chaos into order, and vulnerability into opportunity.